Thank you. We are recording this evening for people who couldn't make it. So we're getting ready to start our ACTFL Strategic Plan Town Hall on the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion pillar. The handout is available at tinyurl.com/ACTFL-EDI. And I'll have that hyperlink noted on the first 5 or 8 slides or so. So don't worry if you don't get it immediately. Also, if you're just joining us, please go ahead and grab a cell phone or a second tab on your computer and go to pollev.com and put in Jessica H 821. And we'll get started in about 1 minute. And if you're looking for that handout, it's at the top right here now. I moved it up here. And that should be accessible. If for any reason it's not accessible, throw that in the chat. Oh, Howie already put the link in the chat as well, if you just want to click on it there. All right. If you're just joining us, thanks so much for being here. We're just about to get started on our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion pillar Strategic Plan Town Hall. If you have a cell phone or a second tab available, we're also going to be using Poll Everywhere. So go to pollev.com and put in Jessica H 821, and that'll get you to our interactive polls that we'll be using during the presentation this evening. I see a few more people are coming in, so we'll wait about 30 more seconds, and then we're going to try to start pretty much right on time.
For those of you coming in too, we do want to mention that we do have an ASL interpreter. Mary is helping us out tonight. We're very happy to have her tonight. We have a spotlight on her. We also have live closed captioning that is occurring this evening. If you go to More and click Show Subtitles, you can view live captioning of tonight's town hall.
It also might just be at the bottom on your little Zoom menu. It might just say CC live transcript the way it shows here. I think it seems to depend on what version you have. Here's the direction, those directions for anyone just coming in. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll show those slides again in a second, but I'd like to formally welcome all of you to our ACTFL Strategic Plan Town Hall on our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion pillar. I'm Jessica Haxey, the president for 2021, and I'm really excited to be with you here tonight. And I want to thank you for being here on a summer evening, on a hot summer evening for many of you across the country and around the world, I'm sure. And we're so thrilled to have you be part of this conversation. The handout that we have for this evening is listed on the top right here. It's a tinyurl.com/ACTFL-EDI. I'll leave that link on the next few slides, so don't worry if you don't get it. If you also could join us on a second tab or on your cell phone at pollev.com, and the username is Jessica H 821. I'm going to move on to the next slide now. If you would like sign language interpretation, Mary Herman will be providing that. She'll be spotlighted so you can watch her. You can also see closed captioning by either clicking on CC on the bottom in your menu or clicking on More and then finding Show Subtitle. So if you're on that pollev.com, you see your first question was, where are you? So we'd love to know where you are in the world. Oh, how exciting. It looks like we have some people in, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world joining us as well. Feel free to go into that pollev. It's on the top here too, if you missed it, pollev.com/Jessica H 821. And oh, it looks like we have people all over the United States, Canada, is that part of, is it close to Indonesia, perhaps? There, it's hard to tell on this map. Looks like we have someone in here from Japan, and then someone here. I'd love for you to put in the chat who this is down here. as well, because it's hard to tell on this map, of course. And we have people in Europe as well, and in Africa. Terrific. Well, we're very excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here at whatever time it might be for you in your home right now. We'd also like to know what you do. Are you a K through 12 educator, higher education educator, K through 12 student, undergraduate student, graduate student, consultant or company representative, nonprofit organization representative, or other? I'm going to check that chat. I have to see. Oh, Kauai is in the house, and Singapore. Wonderful. I spent 3 beautiful weeks in Singapore when I was about 22 years old, back when I had the freedom to spend 3 weeks places. All right. Well, this is great. It looks like we have a nice mix of roles represented here this evening. We do have a number of K through 12 educators, but we also have a number of higher education educators, students, undergraduates, graduates, consultants, and nonprofit folks, and other. Feel free if you'd like to share if you're in the chat. Oh, and from Brazil as well. I just checked the chat. We have directors of early education. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you'll get to speak more to others in our breakout rooms this evening. Did I put this red line across the screen? Are you all seeing this red line across the screen, or is it just me? Howie, you see it? I'm not sure how to eliminate it, and I don't know if I did it. So in any case, thank you very much to these members of our ACTFL's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. It's actually a very large task force, and these members of that task force volunteered this evening to act as facilitators. So you will have the opportunity to meet them and speak with them when you're in your breakout rooms. And I just want to thank them for taking their time to do that tonight. They'll be helping us collate all of your ideas and discussions and suggestions after the town hall ends this evening. I'd also like to thank ACTFL's board members. They have been working on this conversation since they were on the board, some of them before I came on the board, and some of them will continue after I leave the board. And I appreciate all of them and their hard work. And many of them are here this evening to assist and to meet with you in the breakout rooms as well. I'd also like to thank the officers of our special interest groups. I put out a special invitation to them and to see if they might be available to attend this evening. And many of them noted here were able to attend. And I'm sure there were others that didn't see the email for whatever reason, but are also in attendance. So I want to thank them for being here. The equity, diversity, and inclusion conversation needs to touch all aspects of our work by ACTFL members and by these groups. So I'm thrilled that they're here and taking part in this conversation with all of us. And Howie, can I ask you to introduce the ACTFL staff who've also taken time out of their evenings to be with us tonight?
Sure, Jessica. So hi, everyone. I am Howie Berman. I'm the Executive Director of ACTFL. Joining us tonight is Meg Malone, our Director of Assessment and Research, Celia Zamora.
My fault. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of that red line.
That's okay. Our incoming Director of Professional Learning and Certification, Paul Sandrock, who's currently our interim Director of Professional Learning and Certification. He'll be moving to a senior advisor role come July 1. Monique Ennis, who's our Director of Human Resources, Camelot Marshall, our Principal Assessment Manager, Jennifer Clements, who's here from our finance department, our finance manager, Michael Pereira, I believe, who is here, our project coordinator, and one person who's not on this list, who should be, is our wonderful, my wonderful executive assistant, Jamie Kravanka, who's helping out tonight. So thank you, Jamie, for being here as well. And all the ACTFL staff. I know they're not all here, but we're thankful for all of them and all the hard work that they do. So thanks.
Thank you so much. And Jamie has really been instrumental in helping us to organize these town halls. So a big shout out to her. She should have her own big, huge slide. We'll have to get that set up next time. I'd like to just quickly talk about the purpose of the strategic plan town halls. The purpose of these town halls is to build community and collaborative relationships between ACTFL, its members, and non-members. We invited both members and non-members to attend this evening. Because we want to involve members and non-members in reflecting on the pillars of ACTFL's strategic plan We want to have this opportunity to highlight some of the initiatives that are already being undertaken at ACTFL and answer any questions that you might have about the profession in general and or what ACTFL does. And ultimately, we'd like to collect this information in order to inform board and staff decisions about next steps, either this year or in the coming years. So these are the pillars of ACTFL's strategic plan. These pillars define and guide the work of the organization, much like pillars hold up a building. And tonight we'll be focusing on the equity, diversity, and inclusion pillar, but we'll be touching on all of the pillars as we discuss that EDI work with you. Now I'd just like to take a moment to reflect on the importance of this pillar. Let's start with ACTFL's mission statement, which is noted along the top of this slide. ACTFL's mission statement is to provide vision, leadership, and support for quality teaching and learning of languages. In the United States and often abroad, educators, administrators, community members, politicians, and corporations look to ACTFL to define progress in language learning, guide high-quality language instruction, and lead on all world language-related issues. This is a big responsibility. It means that ACTFL has the potential to influence policy and practices and the potential to affect change, no matter how small or how slow it may seem sometimes. Now, please look at the bottom of this slide. For each of our strategic plan pillars, we also have an overarching vision statement. For this pillar, the vision statement is, ACTFL is a leader on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Simply put, if we are to fulfill our mission of providing vision, leadership, and support for quality teaching and learning of languages, then we must be a leader on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. It is only through reflection and action around these issues that quality teaching and learning of languages can happen. This reflection and action is what the field needs and what our students deserve. There's still much work to be done in this area, and I hope that tonight you will help us in our reflection and assist us in our efforts to continue to be a leader in this area. So the guiding questions we have for this town hall are, what is ACTFL already working on with in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion? What are your ideas and suggestions about ACTFL's work in this pillar? And what are your questions about the equity, diversity, and inclusion pillar? And we'll be returning to those over and over this evening. Again, the handout that we're using this evening is listed along the bottom here, tinyurl.com/ACTFL EDI. So let's take a closer look at the equity and diversity and inclusion strategic plan pillar. As I said, each of our pillars has a vision statement, but it also has a set of objectives underneath it. For this pillar, the objectives are make issues of EDI a priority of ACTFL's strategic decision-making process, expand opportunities for volunteer leadership that reflect ACTFL's commitment to EDI, increase support for high-quality research that demonstrates the importance of EDI issues in language education, and demonstrate ACTFL's leadership by convening EDI conversations that affect the language profession. For the purposes of this evening, I've added numbers to each of these objectives so that we can better follow along as we discuss each one. So let's start with the first one. As I mentioned earlier, these are the pillars of our strategic plan. However, when we look at the equity, diversity, and inclusion pillar, we wanted it to be on its own to emphasize its importance. But at the same time, we recognize that this pillar in particular is the through line that should be used as a lens when looking at all the decisions we make in all of our other pillars. And tonight, what we'll be doing is looking at how EDI is reflected as we make decisions about each of these other pillars: outreach, teacher recruitment and retention, research, and professional development. Our second objective underneath this pillar is to expand opportunities for volunteer leadership that reflect ACTFL's commitment to EDI. Bridget Yaden, past president last year, did a lot of work on this during her tenure. So I'd like her to talk a little bit about some of the things that she began her work on that has continued this year in regards to opportunities for volunteer leadership. Bridget?
Great, thank you, Jessica, and welcome everyone. It's nice to be with you all this evening. So as Jessica said, over the past few years, we've really expanded the use of our volunteer portal. So that's the first one here on the left. Our volunteer portal to provide accessible and transparent ways for all ACTFL members to get involved. So on the ACTFL website, if you click on Join and Connect, underneath that, there's a link to get involved. You can see the current opportunities for volunteering. For example, this year we had an open call for service on our various awards committees, and we had an open call to serve on the nominating committee. So please watch that volunteer portal for opportunities to come out. And also we did some work on the nominations processes. So the Leadership Development Committee, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, revised the process for nominations to serve on the ACTFL Board of Directors in order to be more inclusive and transparent. Some of the changes include self-nominations, where in the past nominations had to come officially from an ACTFL partner organization, as well as developing a clear rubric for reviewing the nomination packets. And in terms of selecting volunteers, I'd like to share an example of how we've changed our practices to become more inclusive. When the Leadership Development Committee reviewed the applications for volunteers to serve on the nominating committee, for example, we first did a blind review of the applications. We looked at the answers to the prompts, but we did not look at the names or other identifying features during the first round. We then did an initial ranking based on the blind review, and then looked at names during the second round and other identifying features to help refine our ranking and ensure a balance of representation. Jess, if you could go to the next slide. On the next slide, you can see the members of the Leadership Development Committee, a new committee that was created in 2020 as an outcome of our strategic plan work and as a goal of our past president, Lisa Ritter. The Leadership Development Committee is responsible for identifying potential leaders to serve in volunteer roles within ACTFL, promoting ways to increase volunteer engagement, and developing and supporting the leadership needs of our members. One main task of this committee that supports our EDI commitment is to work with ACTFL staff to identify ways to recruit a diverse and highly qualified group of volunteers for the organization. So I'd like to thank the members of the committee that you see listed here. Thanks to their work so far this year, we've made great progress in removing obstacles to service and in recognizing that there are alternative pathways to leadership and volunteering. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much, Bridget, and thank you for your leadership and mentorship in this area. Next, we'll move on to objective number 3, increase support for high quality research that demonstrates the importance of EDI issues in language education. I'd like Meg Malone, our ACTFL's Director of Assessment and Research, to summarize some of our work in this area. Meg?
So we're doing all kinds of work in this area, and I'm going to show you a couple slides that show what we're doing. But I just want to point out that although, as Jessica said, these pillars are all supporting ACTFL and they all work together. We have overlapping goals. So research needs to include EDI issues, and that's so important. So let me show you some of the things we're going to be doing. Next slide, please. So tomorrow, mark your calendar, tomorrow, the ACTFL research priorities applications are due. Becky Fox, you might want to wave at people. Becky Fox is the chair of our Research and Assessment Committee. And of course, you can all read these, but I want to emphasize, first of all, that EDI belongs in all of these. And we also have 2 priorities that are focused on equity and access. So if you're thinking about submitting an ACTFL research priorities application, please do so. And in 2020, we gave a total of 10 $2,000 grants toward research. And this will all go to help with research and EDI and so on. Some other things that we're doing, if you look at our next slide. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this. In January 2022, we are going to have an entire issue of our flagship journal, Foreign Language Annals, devoted to equity and social justice. And I actually get to read every issue of Foreign Language Annals before it's released. And so I'm excited for every issue you've published. I love reading your work, but this one I expect I'm going to have to reserve a lot of my time to do it because I'm going to be reading it so deeply and taking it all in. The other great thing about this as part of our pillar is that this will be our free access issue for the year. We have one issue of Foreign Language Annals that's open to everybody, whether you're an actual member or not. And we've chosen to make this the open access issue because it's so important. So thank you so much. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate your work in this area as well. Our fourth objective is to demonstrate ACTFL's leadership by convening EDI conversations that affect the language profession. And I'd like to ask Paul Sandrock and Celia Zamora to talk to us about their work in this area.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'll start us off on behalf of the Professional Learning and Certification team at ACTFL. And we have really been focused on trying to bring to the surface issues of social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and started off with two very successful learning series that are, one has happened, the summer is coming up soon, where it helps teachers understand how can we bring more important issues into the content with which we are engaging our learners in their language learning. And that has been, again, engaging teachers in a lot of sharing and excitement around how they can really engage their learners in addressing such issues. It was also part of the focus of our Assembly of Delegates as part of the last year's virtual ACTFL convention, where over 350 delegates came together and spent 4 hours together really looking deeply at how to increase the diversity and inclusion and equity within their own organization and also in all those spheres of influence that they have. It has also been an important goal of the Leadership Initiative for Language Learning, LIL, where this year the number of the diversity and inclusion of those who have been named by their organizations as emerging leaders has really increased notably. And that is, again, both including more organizations, more languages, and more diverse representation as we try to create that leadership pipeline. Celia is going to continue on with some other issues.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And of course, we constantly encourage and really would love to see continued sharing of best practices and of just really asking for suggestions and such in our special interest groups that we have. For instance, we're focusing on critical and social justice approaches this year, as well as heritage language learners. And we are continuing in the professional learning and certification department to bring about free webinars and a lot of wonderful resources to be able to give these resources to teachers to apply this into the classroom setting. And just as Meg mentioned, we are also very excited to note, next slide please, that we have our upcoming winter 2022, the language educator issue on anti-racism in the world language classroom. We are seeking out articles. They are due September 15th. And what we would like to see is how language educators are addressing issues of identity, diversity, action, and justice in the curricula, instructional strategies, and just inclusion practices. So that, once again, is due September 15th, and we are really excited to see all of the wonderful articles that are submitted to be published in winter 2022 issue. Paul?
And in the next slide, we also wanted to just highlight some of the publications where equity, diversity, and inclusion issues have certainly been front and center. Again, trying to support teachers, educators, K-20 in bringing important issues to the language learning in their classrooms. And while all of this these are some of the actions we have taken, we know we have not yet met our goal. We would like, again, to increase the diversity of our presenters and our workshops. It's not an already achieved accomplishment, but definitely an aspirational goal. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Paul and Celia. And one of our most well-known, of course, professional development offerings is our convention. And each year, a board member chairs our convention committee and works in collaboration with ACTFL staff to oversee the creation of the program. This year, our board member, LJ Randolph, has been leading that important and very time-consuming work, and we truly thank him for all of that work, and the entire convention committee, who we'll show you in just a second. But I'd like to ask LJ to talk to you a little bit about how EDI work has been represented in the area of the convention.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. I am super excited about this year's virtual convention, and I just want to talk about some of the ways that we're trying to be intentional about our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion as it relates to the convention. Just to give you a little bit of information about our blind review process, each proposal is rated by 3 to 5 reviewers, and those ratings are used to produce a rank order of proposals. And then after we have a strong base of the top ranked proposals, we go beyond those top scores in order to ensure a balance of several variables, including keywords. So we're certainly intentional about including a variety of great sessions that relate to the keywords of social justice, equitable and inclusive practices, and interculturality. This year we have some lowered discounted rate initiatives. We have a new presenter rate, which is anywhere from $50 to $100 of a discount, depending on what you're comparing it to, members versus non-members, et cetera. The student rate is only $75 for the early bird registrants, and $100 after that early bird deadline has passed. We have a stipend for individuals who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, new teachers, and first-time attendees, and that stipend is $100. And then this year, we're also collecting demographic information on our presenters in order to inform future conventions. So this is to help us to get a better idea of who is presenting and how that compares to our overall membership and our conference attendees. So next slide, Jessica. And here's a list of our convention committee membership. I would just like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the entire committee for all of their hard work and dedication. Thank you to all the people who are on this list, and thank you to our membership. Please feel free to reach out anytime, and I look forward to hearing more ideas from you.
Thank you so much, LJ. And now we'll move on to our pillar of outreach and advocacy. I'd like to ask Executive Director Howie Berman to describe what ACTFL has been working on in this area.
Thanks, Jessica. So ACTFL has had several important statements in the past year that address bias, hate, and systemic racism. We've really taken the position that when we see these ideologies, we need to speak out against them. It's really critical that all educators and learners feel safe in the classroom. And here are just a few of them for reference, and they are linked in the handout. Most recently, our statement in support of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming communities in the wake of really what we've seen is an increase of anti-transgender legislation across the United States. Our statement against anti-Asian racism during and in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, we came out forcefully against new immigration restrictions put in place by the previous administration that would severely limit the J1 and H1B visa programs. Many of you know these programs are essential for filling vacant positions in K-12 and higher ed language programs across the United States. And while this, the proclamation that made this happen has since been revoked by the current administration, there's still considerable backlog of applicants. So that's really something that we're concerned about. And then of course, our statement on the killing of George Floyd and systemic racism last June in the US, in which we stated that, that we really have a responsibility to create learning environments that are not just safe from racism, but also anti-racist. Next slide, please. Of course, statements are a wonderful step. We know this, but we recognize that they're only really worth the paper that they're printed on if they aren't accompanied by concrete, measurable action. And that's why, for example, as a follow-up to our statement in support of the transgender community, I was really proud that the board voted in May to keep future yet to be contracted conventions out of states with anti-transgender laws. And in those states where we are currently contracted that may have such laws already on the books, because we do contract many years in advance, we're going to use our voice along with like-minded member organizations to advocate for change and also empower those on the ground in those states to do the same. Partnering with several organizations, including MLA, TESOL, ACTFL, and many others, ACTFL has helped develop updated guidelines for implementing the Seal of Biliteracy to ensure equitable implementation around the country, and also worked with our partners like JNCL and other organizations to get legislation like the Biliteracy Education, Seal, and Teaching Act, or BEST Act, passed so that students in underserved districts have access to grant money to implement SEAL programs. In the last year, we've convened a Teacher of the Year task force, not only to review the overall program, but also to determine, how can we best ensure that we're recognizing teachers from all backgrounds and experiences. This will obviously require a collaborative effort by all stakeholders involved at the national, regional, state, and local level, but this is incredibly important work. We've also been engaged with the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards with the hope that we can expand National Board certification beyond Spanish and French. Obviously, this is a huge equity issue, as well as providing input and guidance into the revision of their equity, diversity, and inclusion standards this year. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And then finally, ACTFL's been engaged with the Americas Languages Working Group, and most recently, the Americas Languages Initiative, which is a web-based guide to existing examples of language programs that can serve as models for educators, administrators, and even funders to meet the needs of some of our most underserved communities. This project is a direct result of the 2017 AAAS Commission on Language Learning and the subsequent report that came out that really outlined a strategic goal to develop a national strategy to improve access to as many languages as possible for people from every region, ethnicity, and socioeconomic background. Next slide, please. With respect to teacher recruitment and retention, just like with the other pillars, EDI is inextricably linked, as Jessica said. So you'll see some very large-scale advocacy issues that have really been at the forefront of ACTFL's agenda, like college affordability and loan forgiveness, as well as diversifying the teacher pipeline. The most recent American Families Rescue Plan does things like increase Pell Grant awards, it doubles scholarships for future teachers, it targets money for teacher residency programs and teacher prep programs at HBCUs, TCUs, tribal colleges, universities, and MSIs, minority serving institutions. To go even further, the president's budget for FY22 includes a 40% increase in the Department of Ed budget, the largest proposed budget increase for any department. And it sets aside billions for additional grants and tuition support, much of which is intended for underserved communities. So that's something that we're really involved with and paying attention to and excited about. We're also focused on immigration policy. And I think immigration policy is an important thing for ACTFL to be involved with in 2021. I mentioned earlier, regarding the J1 and H1B visa issue. This is very much a teacher recruitment and retention issue. It's also an equity and social justice issue. In the meantime, we're also exploring other opportunities like offering targeted professional development for immigrant teachers, offering legal clinics, legal assistance for those who may have questions or concerns about their specific situation. So we really want to try to offer some more resources in that area. And then I hope many of you are familiar with Educators Rising, our online modules that you can use to engage your high school or college students who may be considering a career in language education. We're excited this fall. The modules are going to be available in Spanish, and then next year we're looking to expand to further to additional languages as well. And then finally, our Lead with Languages scholarship program, which is really dedicated to bolstering the pipeline of future teachers. And we're really proud of this program, and we're hoping to expand it with some very helpful input from some of the members of the D&I task force this past year. The application process and rubric was revised really to address the equity of the process, the equity piece with regard to the process. And as a result, in just the third year of the program, we saw the most applicants and by far the most diverse applicant pool. So thanks. Jessica.
Thank you so much, Howie. And as Howie was saying, actually the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force has been working since last year specifically on these issues. And I'd like to first ask past President Bridget Yaden to talk about how that task force was formed. And then some of the members of the task force will be also unmuting to talk to us about the work. So Bridget's gonna come on, and then we'll have Maria Carrera, Omar Rashid, Jennifer Wu Pope, and Vicky Wong. Bridget?
Great, thanks, Jessica. As I mentioned earlier, we've expanded access to serving ACTFL through the use of the volunteer portal. And when we reconvened the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force in late summer of 2020, as president, I utilized the volunteer portal to recruit a diverse body of members interested in this work. We had dozens of applicants interested in serving. So I'm grateful to the work they've done in just a short amount of time, which you'll hear about now from Maria, Omar, Jennifer, and Vicky.
Thank you, Bridget. As a liaison to the board of directors, my primary job is to keep the board of directors informed about the very important work of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. And you will be hearing about that work from my colleagues in the task force. I just want to say that as a Latina, as a professor of Spanish, and as a specialist in heritage language, this work is particularly important to me, and I am proud that ACTFL has prioritized this work. I'll let my colleagues in the task force tell you about the work they are doing now.
Thank you, and I'll pick it up next. I'm Omar Rashid, and good morning to you from Singapore. It's been actually a real privilege to be serving on the task force and work alongside my colleagues and this Zoom world that has allowed for that too. So as Paul Sandrak was sharing earlier about the Assembly of Delegates, this task force participated in conducting some focused topic discussions and really running self-reflections on the organizations and surveying the landscape during the Assembly of Delegates, where we gathered 350 attendees, and we looked at how the conversation from a frame of why, who, what, where, and how, and then really thinking about what are we doing to bring this back to our own organization.
Thanks, Omar. Another initiative that the task force has been working on is the upcoming Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey. It will be an anonymous survey to help ACTFL better understand the needs and the representation within the language education community. It is also your opportunity to provide input on ACTFL's work in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The insight gleaned from the survey will inform future efforts and support.
And we hope it will be ready next week to go out, by the way, if I can jump in there.
Good evening from Baltimore, Maryland. So at last, I would like to talk about one initiative that we're exploring, which is holding affinity spaces in our future conventions. We recognize that in order to have meaningful affinity spaces, we need to find and train facilitators who are capable of facilitating safe, inclusive, and respectful spaces for our participants. This will take careful and intentional effort and planning. We hope to bring you more updates in the near future.
Thank you very much to all of you for being here this evening and for your work on this important task force. Now we would like to hear from all of you. So I'm going to explain the process that we'll be using to go into breakout rooms and to take notes while we're in those breakout rooms. So all of the strategic plan, vision statement, and objectives that we just discussed are in your handout, and the handout is posted in the chat. I believe everyone was in. If you need it again, just ask for it in the chat. The questions that we're going to be asking you to discuss in these breakout rooms are, in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion in our strategic plan, what is ACTFL doing well? What are your, and perhaps more importantly, what are your ideas and suggestions? And what are your questions? So all of you have access to a note-taking document via your handout. So I'll show you how we're going to use that in a second. So as soon as you get into your breakout room, please go ahead and introduce yourselves. You'll probably have about 10 people with you in your room. Please choose someone to take notes, or if you want to have a couple different people, however you like to do it is fine. The Google Slides note-taking document is linked right on the handout. You'll see it. It's in a bunch of different places and it's hyperlinked. And it has 50 slides in it because we weren't sure how many people we would have. So just find the slide that matches your breakout room number. So when you do get assigned to the breakout room, please pay attention to what number room you're in. That will be the slide that you will type into. Everyone has editing access to these slides. So you'll discuss the guiding questions. They're also on the handout. They're also on the Google slide. And at the 3-minute warning, what we'd like you to do is, as a group, decide your most pressing question and or you can do one of each, your most cherished suggestion. So if you've come up with some great questions, or if you've come up with a great suggestion, either way or both, have a discussion about what those are, because in the final portion of our evening this evening, we're going to gather those questions and suggestions using Poll Everywhere again. So if you missed the Poll Everywhere instructions, they're on the handout as well. Or maybe there'll be someone in your room who was here when we started this evening and has Poll Everywhere up on their phone. That person will type in your most pressing question or suggestion when we come back from breakout rooms, and we'll use that function to have a whole group discussion of the questions and suggestions that come from each breakout room. So I hope that's clear. These directions themselves are also on your handout. So if anyone doesn't have the handout, please go ahead and, oh, there it is. Howie put it again in the chat. So you will need the handout. And then when time is up, we'll pull you back to the main room, and that's when we'll put in our Poll Everywhere suggestions. Oh, so there it is. So right now we'll be moving into breakout rooms. If anyone has a question, feel free to leave your breakout room and come back to the main room and ask it. But otherwise, we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Nope. Oh, it is working. All right, so I think everyone will be coming back little by little now. We'll wait till everyone's back. If you're coming back and you have your question or suggestion, please go ahead and go to pollev.com. It's up on the top there. It's also on your handout, but it's up on the top, pollev.com, and put in Jessica H. 821, and then go ahead like this first person did and type in your suggestion or your question. And then those of you who are in Poll Everywhere, you can upvote or downvote questions and suggestions to make sure that they rise to the top. So if you see something that you're really interested in, you can go ahead and vote for it, and that will mean that it's a question or suggestion that gets bumped up. So please, we'll wait another minute. So if my colleagues can just keep me on task, that we're gonna at about 8:42, let me know, and we'll wrap up this discussion. Great, so here they are coming in. Go ahead and read those over. Feel free to upvote the things that you're most interested in. All right,
Jessica, I don't see anything on the screen. Should I see something right now?
Oh, I'm seeing it. Is no one else seeing it? Oops. Okay, let me redo that. Thank you, Howie.
I can see it.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, you could? Okay, hold on.
Maybe it's me.
I can see it.
Oh, really? Hold on. Now I have to get back to the slide. That's okay. It's giving everyone a chance to type in all their things here and do their voting. Now I don't see it because I got out of it. Let me share my screen.
I could see the Poll Everywhere interface, but it was a blank.
It was blank, correct.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, let me reactivate Poll Everywhere and see how we do here. Here we go, everyone. I apologize. Okay, let's see. Now if we can get it to roll. We'll take a breath. Usually it takes a second. Nope. Oh, here we go. Yay. Okay. All right. So it looks like as of right now, our top vote getter here is how can we develop robust methods to support incoming and new teachers? What are different ways to grow our own teachers? How can we involve retired teachers? Wow, what a terrific question. So I'm going to ask maybe Paul and Celia to unmute at this point. And I'll start off just by saying that we do have some ACTFL, the ACTFL Summer Learning Series this year actually does have a focus on new teachers and is offering a hopefully very affordable 3-day session for new teachers to get them rolling. Leslie Baldwin, who wrote Keys to the Classroom, is going to be teaching that, and I'm actually going to be working with her on that because it's a topic that I do a lot of work on in New Haven Public Schools. Paul and Celia, do you want to talk a little bit about growing our own teachers in this area, I assume, of equity, diversity, and inclusion? Or maybe involving retired teachers?
Sure, I think one of the best ways to both involve retired teachers as well as grow our incoming teachers and our new teachers is the whole mentoring program that we offer. That I think that's something that everyone can be involved in as mentors and mentees. Sometimes it's really difficult to find a mentor in your own school system or district. So it's nice to be able to really access that, and even our special interest groups, and find a mentor or find somebody that teaches the language, especially if it's a less commonly taught language. You can share best practices, you can share resources on our community boards in order to really affect your classroom and see how you're able to apply all of those things and answer those questions when normally maybe in your community you wouldn't find those resources.
Thank you so much. And if I could ask one of the staff who's on right now to find the link to the mentoring page on the ACTFL website, because that is something we don't have on the handout that I would, thanks so much for mentioning that. That is a great program and a great way to involve retired teachers as well. It looks like the second most popular question is how can we further elevate the cultural capital of multilingual, that I assume that multilingual learners, oops, it keeps flipping, sorry. Well, I'll read this one first. How can we further elevate the cultural capital that multilingual learners bring to the classroom? And I think I'll ask Maria Carrera to unmute and help us out with that conversation, and anyone else actually on the board or on the task force or on staff who'd like to help discuss this. But I know Howie has already mentioned a little bit about how ACTFL was involved in the rewriting of the Seal of Biliteracy guidelines. But in addition to that work, Bridget Yaden last year with Howie, and Bridget, feel free to unmute, also did a lot of presentations on the use of the Seal of Biliteracy as a way to elevate and celebrate the language's assets of multilingual learners. And I'm sure this conversation goes beyond that, but I wanted to just highlight that as well. And this year, actually next week at AATSP, a group of us are doing another presentation about celebrating language assets with programs such as Seal of Biliteracy. Did anyone else want to talk about elevating the cultural capital that multilingual learners bring?
So did I hear you say?
Maria, feel free to jump in. I know this is an area of passion for you.
Right. Obviously, heritage language learners have a big role to play in that. Many years ago, there was a seminal paper that was put out that referred to these learners as a national resource, a way to fill capacity in critically needed languages to make us more competitive in the global market. So how do we do that? Well, 3 things. First of all, it strikes me that the ACTFL proficiency guidelines are excellent in this regard because they are functionally based. They don't test whether you know the rules of grammar or grammatical terminology. They test what you can do with language. That is a strong suit of heritage language learners. Second, increasing instruction that is specialized for heritage language learners. As hard as we keep working to do this, we still don't have enough heritage language courses and materials for all the languages, all our immigrant languages. So that should be a priority. And then the third thing I would say is creating more professionally minded courses where we take the great skills that our learners bring to the classroom and we develop them so that they can be put to use in the professional field, in society at large as well.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I know that we've also started having some initial discussions about, taking a hard look at the World Readiness Standards and seeing to what extent we are supporting interculturality and the development of intercultural skills and celebrating multilingual learners in that document as well. But that's in the very sort of early idea stages. I think I'll move on to another one. So we've got advocating for immigrant teacher voices. And I think Howie already spoke to this a little bit in his discussion. Howie, did you want to say more about that?
No, I just think, look, it's sort of a shift in, first there's a shift in policy, right? So from a policy standpoint, I don't think immigration policy has necessarily been at the forefront of ACTFL sort of policy our priorities. I don't think we naturally have thought of immigration policy as sort of on that agenda, and I think now we have to, because it has such an effect on us from a teacher pipeline perspective, but also it's a social justice and equity issue. I think there are many resources that we can be offering our immigrant teachers, but I also think it's about giving them, offering them space, offering opportunities to tell their stories, at our convention, at other professional learning events. We can learn a lot there, and I think we need to hear those stories. But yeah, I think on the whole, it's a mindset shift. It really is making sure that we are elevating our policy priorities to include immigration, because it's incredibly important.
Thank you. Was there anyone else on the panel here sort of that wanted to say anything about that one? All right, so it looks like the next question that's a high vote getter here is, how do we show up for our LGBTQ community plus communities of students and teachers in an intentional way, intentionally? And I think we've already talked a little bit about the ACTFL's statement in this regard and some of the actions that we've taken as an organization to not hold any future conferences that haven't been contracted yet in cities that have anti-transgender legislation on the books. But I think this is asking a larger question about how do we sort of guide teachers in showing up for students and teachers who are LGBTQ plus. And
Jessica, I would say too, this is why I love, and Vicki talked about this before, I love the idea of creating these affinity spaces, because I do think we need to, we want to make sure that people feel like ACTFL is a place where they can have those conversations. And I think affinity spaces give them that space, right? And not just for our LGBTQ plus communities, but also for many other communities. So that's why I think, pursuing the affinity space, the affinity group as a priority is really critical, because I just think it's another step. Again, like I said, statements are nice, but we need to really demonstrate that that we're welcoming, that we want people to be here. We want them to feel like ACTFL is a place that they belong, and it's really a priority. So,
did anyone else want to make a comment? Teresa, Austin, I see you. Would you like to would you want to unmute? And Teresa's one of our leaders in the field for years and years and years, and I see she put a comment. So did you want to comment on that, Teresa?
Well, I thank you, Jessica, for allowing me to comment on it. And I see this as when an organization takes a stance like this, it's really significant, But then I think about also about the teachers in the states that are being affected. And I think that as we hold on to these principles, we also have to think about how to support teachers that are in those states. So I'd like to make sure that that the organization and the membership in those states still get some sort of support so that they can build up a consensus around these issues, especially for the LGBTQ plus communities. That's all.
Thank you so much.
This is Angelica. Can I jump in a little bit on
Please
that?
do. Yeah.
So just very quickly, and I know that this might not seem a whole lot, but I'm in Tennessee. I'm in a somewhat of a small town and very conservative. I worked for a very conservative high school, and like I did a very intensive job to accommodate and embrace diverse students, especially in the LGBTQ plus community. And a lot of the times, the way that I would justify it's that my professional association embraces diversity. And many times when, sometimes like we had a parent complain, or even my principal approached me about, a transgender student, for example, or how the student wanted to be addressed, I would back up with an ACTFL statement, or and say, hey, I teach language and my professional language association embraces this. So that, it's a way that teachers cannot feel completely alone in this, I guess, uphill battle, right, with states and administration and so on. So just to put out there, if somebody wants to have, a backup strategy, that's a way that I got around.
Thank you so much for that, Angelica. And like I say again, being ACTFL is a big responsibility, because that is something that we can provide and we can affect. And that's why having these statements and having the documents that we have, and looking at those documents and reflecting on those documents and ensuring that those documents are giving the guidance that is aligned with these words that we're saying, right? And that will affect actions that are aligned with these things we're saying. That's really important. And that's not work that's going to end tonight. And it's not work that's going to end with one statement. And I see there's questions about, how will this work continue? It'll continue as it's continuing now, because the board of directors and the ACTFL staff is committed to the work, and the people coming onto the board, even through this new process that we had this year, where people were able to self-nominate and really reflect what their beliefs were about diversity and equity and inclusion in their applications to be on the board. I think you're going to have a board that is committed to this work for years to come. So we do have to wrap up soon, but I do see that there were a couple of questions here about foreign languages. And so I'm just going to quickly address this to say that I was not on the board when this action was done, but I know that I think it was 2 years ago now that ACTFL actually did drop the foreign from their title, right? So when people ask us what is ACTFL, I don't say the F word that we used to say. I say the National World Language Teachers Organization. And I realize that is difficult because the F is still there in the title, and we are working on better ways to sort of explain that. But I'm sure that a number of things went into that decision at the time regarding how many places that name was plastered and whatnot, but Howie might want to explain a little bit more about it, or I think he might have a document that he can post there.
Yeah, well, there's an article in a previous issue of the Language Educator, and I can post that article. And we are working on making that clearer on our website. But I think what was determined was sort of the ACTFL brand. That acronym was so well known when we did focus groups, when we did interviews, when we did sort of the process of discovery, that yeah, we wanted to change the name, but we didn't want to lose that acronym because it was so well recognized. But we recognized that using that term, that word foreign, I think the board saw that as sort of an obstacle to progress. That, some people interpret that word, many people interpret that word as something that is, that language learning is viewed as strange or unfamiliar. I remember Chris Emden made it he was very eloquent in his closing keynote a few years ago about that concept of, foreign, making it seem as if it's difficult, right? And we don't want to send that message. And then we added that tagline, that language connects tagline, which I think really demonstrates that language is a bridge. It's a bridge to cultural competence. It's a bridge to to empathy, to understanding one another. And I think in what better year or way have we sort of recognized how important language is as a means for connection than this past year, when many of us have been unable to physically be with one another. I mean, language has been so incredibly important. So it's, I think it's an accurate representation of how we've sort of evolved, but it's also very aspirational, because we want to be an inclusive organization, and we want to be seen as leading in these areas. So that's really kind of the genesis behind it.
Thank you, Howie. And clearly this is an area that, people have strong opinions about, and these are very valid opinions. In many of our states, we moved away from foreign many years ago, and it was very helpful to the conversation. So I'm sure it's something that ACTFL will continue to consider and address. And unfortunately, I need to move us on. I know we could stay here for another 2 hours probably discussing all these questions, but the questions will be saved in my poll everywhere. And like I said, we have all of your wonderful comments on the Google slides. So I hope that if there was something that didn't get addressed or an idea you have, I see in the chat. I'll also print the chat. But if there are things that you want to express, please feel free to go onto those Google slides and make sure they get there, because my facilitators who worked with us this evening will be helping to collate all of those, and they won't just be put on a shelf. So let's plan to stay connected around this work. If anyone, either member or non-member, can become a part of this ACTFL community and talk about this issue, we have under the strategic plan town halls community on our ACTFL Central. I posted a thread to start this conversation, so feel free to go there. I have a link right on the handout to this ACTFL community area, and then you just have to create a login if you're not a member. And we also are on Twitter, and so we'll be posting updates and various announcements about future town halls on the other pillars here. And we also encourage you to volunteer through the portal. That's how we found our entire diversity and inclusion task force. It's how we seated our nominating committee this year. And we're really going to continue to use that for any volunteer opportunities that come up. So please do volunteer. And again, I'd like to thank you so much for being here on this hot summer evening. From everywhere you're coming from, all over the world, we value your input. We're going to take much time to look over this and contemplate it as a board, as a staff, as an organization. And thank you to all of the presenters this evening as well for sharing your expertise. Take care, everyone. See you at the virtual convention.
Thanks, everybody.